Hello, it's me. This is Andrine, a Jewish American priestess. And I'm coming to you today. I've been humbled by illness, and it's been a long time since I've had the space and the energy, taken the space and the energy to do a reading. But I'm here today, and today I'm going to look at the moon, the unknown, the shadow side, she who is ever changing and yet ever the same. And to that end, I have 4 cards here, which will be 4 separate readings. Each of these is one of the moon cards from a different deck, and we'll take a look at them. You'll get to choose which one is drawing you today. And I'll put the timestamps in the description box below so you can discern where you need to go and which moon you need to consult today to give you some insight into this next period of time as we are passing through fullness and moving into a time of waning, maybe a time of rest. So let's take a look at the cards in turn. First we have the Gates of Pohjola. This is from the Mythologia Fennica deck based on the Finnish mythology of the Kalevala. Second, we have the moon from the golden Botticelli deck. Next up is the moon from the Aquarian tarot. And lastly, we have the moon on the water from the Wildwood tarot deck. So take a moment to look at each of these cards, or all of these cards, and see which of these moons is speaking to you today. And you can pause the video if you need and find your timestamp down below. Trust your intuition. The moon is all about intuition. Trust your intuition to know which moon has a message for you today. And I will see you in your reading. Hello, card number 1. For those of you who've chosen the Gates of Pohjola, this is what your card looks like. The moon. The moon represents challenges and tests, the subconscious facing your dark side, your unconscious instincts and hidden dreams, hopes and choices, gateways to new consciousness and levels of energy and spiritual awakening. The story around the Gates of Pohjola is that there are spirits who govern the moon. The Kutar, the female spirit who governs over the moon, sits with Päivitar on the rainbow, weaving protecting cloths with golden and silvery yarns. Together they rule the wasps and the bumblebees. They can bring healing ointment. The moon controls the rhythm of life, and the activities of everyday life are synchronized to its phases. The kumes are creatures that cover the waning moon behind an iron wing, and their counterparts, the kapis, release the waxing moon again. The night is traditionally the time of beasts and ghosts and thieves, which are illuminated by the moon. There's a road that leads to the village of Pohjola. It's the joyless path of Manala. It's filled with obstacles and challenges, and a traveler is forced to walk on the points of needles and the blades of swords, passing by a fiery rapid guarded by a flaming eagle. The stone hill of Pohjola is heavily fortified, and the only way through it is the gates of Pohjola. They are locked. They reach the bowels of the earth and up to the heavens. There are 9 locks and 9 gates, one set toward each layer of Manala. The gates are framed by snakes, guarded by a dog that barks only when someone is coming, and by the bear or wolf of Manala. Pohjola Manala is often considered to be an island covered in mist or smoke with an eternal fire burning at its center. So the moon's energy is this feminine, subconscious energy, constantly changing. And it symbolizes our unconscious instincts, dreams, and hopes. It can symbolize the fact that there are thieves coming to disturb what's sacred to us, robbing us of our energy and our life force. It's like when someone asks you for something and you can't say no, but you know you need to say no. So they steal your time. There's some kind of inner thief. The gates represent a journey to the world below, down underneath our conscious, and in there are fears and shadow selves. And the way there is filled with danger, or perceived danger. The challenges seem long and enduring and painful, but they have healing and honing effect. And when one passes through the gates like a rite of initiation, one comes through with greater insight. The journey isn't easy, but you must stay strong and boldly face the things you have tried to hide from yourself. You have to find your own inner guide to make your way. It's a true and sincere way of life, and it's important to remain receptive and open and let your intuition lead you along the path toward the gates and through the gates, ideally. So that's a lot. The gates of Pohjola. And I guess we'll pull out some Hebrunes today. I'm feeling very much like this is a scatter spread, and I don't know if this is going to be the case with every one of the readings today, but this is what's coming up for me today for card number 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my bowl, my incantation bowl of Hebrunes. You can see I've written incantations on the bottom of it here. And I'm going to shuffle them up and just grab a handful and toss them down and see what's our message today from the gates of Pohjola. Okay. So we have 4 Hebrunes today. And I'm going to leave them just as they are. Actually, I'm not even going to touch them. Let's take a look. The 4 Hebrunes that I see are Pe, Kaf, Vav, and Aleph. And they're in a variety of different directions. I'm going to start just kind of in the upper right corner with the letter Pe. And I'm going to pull it up here so we can see it. Now, Pe is said to be a mouth. The mouth of the divine. It's about communication And creation, it's about using one's words to create what one wants to see in the world. It's a spiral, so it speaks to time and cycles and seasons. And with regards to the moon, that ever-changing, spiraling, time measuring device that we have, it seems really appropriate. It's the number 80 in Gematria, and so it represents ultimate manifestation of the infinite. 8 being the infinity loop, and also one more than the number of days of creation, times 10, which is, multiplies it by a factor. So 80, the timelessness of all, which again corresponds so well to the moon. This timeless, seemingly timeless heavenly body above us that comes and goes. It appears to us in an infinite fashion, always changing and always present. And it has this binary transformation of grace and ugliness. In the Sefer Yetzirah, each of the double letters has a binary transformation. Pei is for grace and ugliness, and I always think of it in terms of blessings and curses, because it is about speech. What do we need to bless in the world, and what do we need to not curse in the world? Because we want maybe it's time to look into the subconscious with regards to the moon and feel the thing that we want to curse and recognize its blessing instead. How can we transform those curses into blessings? So for instance, with regards to healing and illness, one cannot have healing without illness. So if you've been struggling with something that's just a curse, or feels like a curse, a person or a situation or a circumstance in your life that feels like such a curse, what is the blessing underneath it? Maybe a difficult situation in a relationship or in a endeavor, be it relationship with a loved one or a family member or just a person at your place of employment. What is the blessing underneath it? This challenge, this honing that is happening. How can we transform those things that we see as curses into blessings? And how can we speak into the world that which we'd like to see rather than cursing that which we don't want to have happening? How can we pray for healing instead of cursing the illness? That seems very strong here today. I see the letter Pei in the Hebrunes as corresponding to the Hierophant in the traditional tarot. The Hierophant, which is sometimes seen as this rigid, religious, strict person, but also can be seen as a mouthpiece for the divine. The rigidity there and the rules put in place are there for protection, however misguided. And underneath that, there's someone who's able to hear the voice of the divine and speak it into the world. And maybe that's you. So we have this mouth. And it's leaning up against, it was sitting here leaning up against this other Hebrune, the letter Kaf, which is turned nearly upside down. The letter Kaf or Chaf, I'm going to pull it out here. It looks like this upright, but we found it like this. And I find that interesting because it sort of looks like a crescent moon in its way and the way it changes. It's said to be the palm of a hand or the sole of a foot. And it has this binary transformation of wealth and poverty. It's another one of the double letters. And so as a binary of wealth and poverty, it has that transformation. How can we take the things that we feel are impoverishing us and see how they bring wealth into our life? Again, one cannot have wealth without understanding poverty. And one cannot have poverty without having something to lose. It's the first letter of the word koach, which means power or strength. Also the first letter of the word keter, which means crown. And it symbolizes those things that we can put on top of our head. We can put a hand on top of our head, or a kippah, or a crown, or the idea of power. And since it was sort of reversed, I'm going to say this is about inner power. Where is our inner power right now? Is it upside down? Is it a little bit topsy-turvy? Are we giving so much that we are finding ourselves impoverished? Or are we hoarding so much that we are becoming spiritually impoverished? It represents like the top of a sukkah. In the fall, we build these little huts outside to dwell in during the harvest season and during Sukkot. And the sukkah has this top on it that's made out of shach, and it's got the letter kaf in it twice. That shach it's meant to cover over us, but it's also meant to let in the light. So it has both the shading quality as well as this ability. We're supposed to build it so that it shades us from the sun, but so that we can see the stars. And Sukkot always comes at the full moon. So we can see the moon up through the schach on the roof of our sukkah. So although we are being sheltered from the sun during the day, we're still allowing light in. So it's got that binary quality of shadow and light, which I love with regards to the moon. It can be about oppression as well, since if somebody's got their hand on your head and is pushing you down, or their foot on your neck, or maybe you're limiting yourself. But this is like an inner limiting. This is an inner power struggle, maybe with the idea of finding your shadow self, with the idea of struggling with what's alive inside of you and what seems to be powerless inside of you. And the kaf also represents the wings of Shekhinah, the indwelling presence of the divine that is sheltering over us. It's about the hand of the Shekhinah lifting us up, so we can feel that inner presence even as we walk the hard road. The kaf rules over the sun in the sky, which is our source and also can be harsh and difficult, especially as we come into the summer. It can burn if we are not sheltered appropriately. Too much of a good thing, right? And so we have the kaf here, sort of hidden slightly by the pei. It's being covered over by the mouth of the divine, and it's our inner strength. On the left side, we have the letter Vav on its side again. And the Vav is representative of a tall, standing person with a slightly bent head. They have some humility here. It is the letter that is literally the word and in Hebrew, and it's all about connection. Connection with oneself, connection with the divine, connection with others, making connections in the life with different things coming together, coincidences and synchronicities. It's like a peg or a hook that is tethering us to the ground and connecting all the pieces, fastening our clothing and our curtains, the curtains around the Holy of Holies. It's the number 6 in Gematria, and so it speaks to the 6th day of creation, the last day of active creation of the divine, things being nearly finished. And it was lying face down like this on the reading. So it's got an ultimate humility here. It's not just a person with a bowed head, it's a person prostrating themselves and really humbling themselves, maybe before the moon, before this transition that's happening, before the gates. Because we've made this long journey and we're exhausted, right? And we're heading toward the gates for that ultimate, almost finished trial to find the inner revelation, before the transformation, before the rest of Shabbat, before the rest that we come to at the end of creation. We've come this far, so we've just fallen on our faces before the gates. And I find that amazing and beautiful with regards to the gates of Pohjola and all this travel that we've made to come to this one place, to divest ourselves of everything and become just this connection, just this and. It corresponds with the month of ER, which was last month. That month of transition between our liberation at Passover and our revelation at Shavuot. That connecting month. And it corresponds to the gallbladder in the body, which is an organ that assists in digestion. It provides us with bile, which is seemingly this substance which is kind of unpleasant, but it's so necessary in digesting things. It's essential, in fact. If one has too much of it, one is ill, and if one has too little of it, one is ill. So having appropriate amounts of bile in the gallbladder, when that gallbladder is not functioning appropriately, you can really feel it right in the center of yourself. So gallbladder is down, it seems like. These little ducts that are connecting all the things maybe aren't functioning as well as they might. And Vav has this interesting characteristic in grammar in Hebrew, and I'm not a Hebrew linguist, I don't even speak Hebrew particularly well, but I understand that it has the ability to transform verbs and give them a change in tense. So if something is in the past tense and you add a Vav to it, it becomes the future. And if something is in the future tense and you add a Vav to it, it becomes the past. So it's got this transformative property around time. And that's a magical ability, to be able to see the past in the future and to be able to see the future in the past. That stepping outside of time, both and, past and future, and dwelling in the present, of course, which is the place that we are now. I see Vav as corresponding to the Lover's card in tarot because it is that connection. It's that connection between two or more, connection with one's own self and one's higher self, connection with the divine, connection with the moon. I think of the moon as a lover's body as well, because it's connected inextricably to the earth and also to the sun. It's kind of balanced between the two. And lovers and the moon, there's so many songs about lovers and the moon. Even though it's a difficult time, the night, to be illuminated in the night. So Vav here, face down. And the final letter in our reading today is the Aleph. And the Aleph is the first letter. And it's also lying on its face. Aleph is the number one, the alpha, right? The first letter. It's a silent letter. It has no sound unless we give it voice. It's that it's like breath. It is the mother letter of air. So every time one takes a breath, it's the Aleph. It balances above and below. You can see above in the upper right corner a Yud, and in the lower left corner another Yud, and the Vav in between connecting both. So it balances the heavens and the earth. It balances the divine above and the divine below. It balances heaven and earth, so the divine above and the divine in us. and connects those things, but they don't meet at a central point. You'll notice they're offset because that connection is work. We can't just fall into it. We have to make the connection. We have to be actively involved in connecting the divine above and the divine below. It's about air and wind, and we have so much wind here this week. It's been ridiculously windy, as if the Shekhinah herself is calling. And Aleph has this other interesting principle in that it is the number 1, but if you spell it with a different vowel, it becomes Aleph, which is 1,000. So it has this idea of the unity of oneness and the multiplicity of the thousandness, the unity within multiplicity and the multiplicity within unity, and that we have one self and a myriad interpretation of self. One universe and trillions of stars, one body and trillions of cells, one divine and infinite manifestations of the divine. I also think of Aleph as a crossroads. You can see it looking like the crossroads coming together, what direction to go now. It corresponds to the chest and lungs in the body, where we breathe, and also where our heart lives. Again, that connection piece, the lovers right there in the Vav in the center. And most of the names of the divine in Hebrew begin with the letter Aleph. We have El, Elohim, the plural names of God, the El Elyon, the God of gods, Adonai, Lord, and also Adam, Adama, earth, mud, human. All begin with Aleph. All begins with Aleph. And we find it face down in our reading today, which would indicate that it is also humbled. The Aleph has also been humbled. That we are bowing to the earth and while at the same time reaching for the moon. And it lies here underneath the sun and underneath the mouth of the divine, speaking into existence all of creation. So as we contemplate our moon this month, this full moon of Sivan, as we come into the summer solstice very soon, as we make this transition, we just made the transition from the month of May to the month of June. We're making the transition from the Shavuot, the revelation, as we move forward on our path through the fullness of the moon and into the waning now as we move towards solstice. We can remember to speak blessing with our pay, to find the things we'd like to curse and find the blessings within them. To claim our inner power with the Kaf, protect ourselves from the sun and feel the wings of Shekhinah sheltering us. Find humility in our connections with ourselves, with others, with the divine. And as we approach the gates of Pohjola, as we approach the gates of transformation, remember that we're connected with the divine, with oneness, with the Aleph, with the allness, and find our way through the gates. After our long journey, look to the moon for guidance about waxing and waning. Look to the moon as a steady presence, even as it changes. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this helpful. And we'll see you here next time. Hello. Card number 2, those of you who chose La Luna, the moon, from the Golden Botticelli deck. This is what she looks like. The moon, she's card number 18, which for those of you who know anything about Hebrew is the number that represents the word chai, meaning life. It's symbolic of mystery, a yearning for fulfillment, unforeseen difficulties, challenges, perils, situations, psychic forces. It's the unknown and the unseen. The moon gets a bad rap sometimes for being feminine, basically, is what it comes down to. You can see in this particular card, we have a winged being, an angel. Botticelli painted a lot of angels. And in particular, I think this one is the one bringing the lily to announce the Annunciation to the mother of the child. And you can see in the background there's a mountain, which I'm thinking is probably Sinai. It's probably the mountain of Revelation. And down at the bottom we have the lobster, which is ubiquitous in the moon card. Hilarious for a Jewish reading, since lobsters are not kosher. That's supposed to represent the horrible beast from below, the trafe coming out of the pool of the unconscious to frighten us. Nothing to be frightened there. And over here on the right side, I see some kind of fortress, which is interesting. I've never seen the fortress in a moon card in another deck, but I think there are also ships on the water, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, there are ships on the water. So there's something about travel in this particular deck. It speaks to moving through the unconscious, maybe moving, being outside of that protective fortress into this subconscious or unconscious or the unknown, traveling by night. Maybe being watched over, but having in this case very little light. It's a crescent moon, even though we are in the full moon of Sivan right now. So this is our card for today, La Luna, in all the different languages. I'm going to set her off to the side. So let's contemplate what mystery is being revealed right now. I'm going to shuffle up the Hebrunes in my incantation bowl. And I've got the moon in there as well. I just remembered the moon and the sun. Let's shuffle these up and see what comes out today. I'm going to do a scatter spread. Just grab a handful and see what falls. What unconscious messages are coming in today. Okay. All right, so we have, looks like 5 different Hebrunes have fallen today, and none of them are exactly upright. We're going to take a look at each of them individually and see if we can draw a message out of them. Maybe I'll scooch them over, this one over just a hair so we can see it not in the shadow. Interesting that it is in the shadow. Maybe I'll leave it because there's something about the shadow self, about the shadow side of the moon that is essential in this reading. I'm going to start at the top. In the upper left, right on the moon card itself, we have the letter Nun. And this is what it looks like when it's upright. It's representative of someone who's humble. It's somebody who's on their knees and bowing as well. It's the first letter of the word Ne'aman, which means humility. And not only is it a bowing, humbled person, but it's on its side. So it's really humbled, this humbleness, humbling itself before the moon. before the unknown, before the unconscious. In this case, the letter Nun. And because it's on its side, I'm going to say that's having to do with really prostrating oneself before this unknown, before this unseen that we're dealing with right now. What is the journey that you're on that is causing you to humble yourself, causing you to fall on your face? The letter Nun is also the first letter of the word Nes, which means miracle. And I love that in terms of humility and miracles, because they're inextricably connected. That when we see something that's miraculous, we may fall down on our face in humility and in humbleness before it. And the moon itself has that capacity to humble us. When we see a beautiful moon, even though she's always up there, sometimes we're just struck by her beauty, by her grandeur. And when we are humbled, we are more likely to see the miracles in the sky, in our lives, all the different places. It's about faithfulness as well, the Nun, and about this loyalty. And I think of the moon as being particularly loyal. I don't know if that's common, but the moon, she's always there, even when we can't see her. And that feels very comforting to me, that she is faithful to us, always changing and yet always present. And she's faithful to the earth, and she's faithful to the sun. She shines the sun's light. And that takes a certain amount of loyalty. The letter Nun has a bunch of different meanings in different Semitic languages. In the Aramaic language, the letter Nun represents fish, which means abundance, because fish are very abundant, apparently. So there's many fish in the sea, they say. So there's something about abundance coming in with the Nun. And in the Zohar, the mystical writings, the Nun represented deceit. And I think that's common amongst the moon too. It's seen that the moon is deceiving because it's because it appears in darkness. But I think it's also illuminating. The Nun corresponds with the constellation of Scorpio, which I love with regards to the lobster coming up from the bottom. It's like a scorpion in that same way. So there's something about the unknown and about that thing that appears to be threatening. And the Nun corresponds to the stomach in the body. And I know from personal experience, the stomach can humble us very quickly if it's not functioning properly. So my stomach has been humbled recently. So it's been time to take time in humility and in understanding the miracle of the body when it works properly. I see the Nun as corresponding to the Hermit card in Tarot, because it is another figure who is humbled and taking time to contemplate the wonders, to go within like the moon and really look at the inner self to find their way. It's showing the way also with the light. They have usually a lantern, the hermit does, like the moon in the night, shining the way. So that's our first letter in the reading, is the Nun, right here on the moon card. Prostrating itself before the moon, which I love. Next to it, we have the Dalet, also face down. So many prostrated letters today. And Dalet is the letter that represents a doorway or a gate. And Dalet also means humble. It's the word dal means somebody who is poor or impoverished. So there's something about humility there as well. And also it's face down. Interesting. I guess the Nun is actually on its back and the Dalet's on its face. So it's an interesting juxtaposition. Dalet is this gateway through which we need to walk in order to make it to the next iteration. And that seems essential as we walk through the doorway of the full moon into the waning time right now, as we walk toward the solstice. And that gateway in the year, the Dalet is the letter that represents the binary foundation, the binary transformation of wisdom and foolishness. In the Sefer Yetzirah, all the double letters have this binary. And Dalet is wisdom and foolishness. And when we walk through each gate or doorway, how can we find ourselves wisely moving forward rather than foolishly leaping forward? It's this threshold that we must pass over. And Dalet is the number 4, so it does represent the 4 seasons. And as we move from the season of spring into the season of summer, coming up in the next couple of weeks, we need to pass through that gateway. It represents the 4 directions, the north, south, east, west, and the 4 elements of earth, air, fire, and water. And also the 4 letters of the divine name, the Yud, He, Vav, He. We prostrate ourselves before the elements, before the seasons, before the directions, before the name of the divine, which is becoming, which is being, having been, existing, and continuing to exist into the future. That idea of transformation and becoming. Dalet rules over the planet Mars in the sky. The Mars has all kinds of connotations of war and struggle, but I think it also has this connotation of protection in some way, because what are wars other than attempts to protect? I guess they can be seen as attempts to take as well, but ideally one takes only for survival or to defend against another enemy. However that resonates for you, this Dalet is prostrated. This Dalet is face down. And in my reading of the Hebrunes, the Dalet corresponds to the death card, because it is the ultimate doorway. It's the ultimate transition from this life to the next. And we prostrate ourselves before that as well, in humility before the mortality of ourselves. And the moon reminds us of that change that's coming, that transformation that is coming, as far as I know, for all of us. Hopefully no time soon, Kenahora, but it's important to remember these transitions, these gateways that we pass through. In the lower left corner, we have the letter Zayin, and it's partially hidden in the shadows, which I love. Zayin is the letter that corresponds to the month of Sivan, where we are right now, this full moon of Sivan that we are in. It is the number 7 in Gematria, so it speaks to the final day of creation, the day of Shabbat, the day that we rest. Again, humbled in the shadow. The letter Zayin is a sword or a scepter, so it speaks to power and sovereignty. Magic. The number 7 is a magical number. It's seen as the number of luck. And power, the power that comes with sovereignty. It's the Shabbat bride. It is the Shekhinah being the Shabbat bride, the indwelling presence that arrives for us each and every Shabbat and dwells within us at all times, often represented by the moon. If the 7, it has to do with the 7 weeks of the Omer, which we just completed at Shavuot, the 7 times 7. I think of it as lightning and coming down on the mountain at Sinai, where Moses received the revelations, the divine utterances. It corresponds to the spleen in the body. What does the spleen do? I believe it makes red blood cells. It's important. It keeps us alive. Wow, did that candle just go out? It sure did. Fascinating. The spleen is this incredibly important organ in our body. And Zayin corresponds to the tribe of Zebulun, which is the tribe who travels. He goes off over the sea, brings back fish, and helps to support his brother Issachar, who is the one who studies. So it's about going forth into the world and gathering new experiences so that you can bring them back and study them, perhaps. And I see the Zayin is corresponding to the tarot card of the Emperor with power and authority, but it's face down here and it's in the shadows. So when I see the Zayin in this position, in this part of the reading, again, humbled. Our sovereignty has been humbled. Our magic is taking a rest. It's just lying down like Shabbat. We're needing to take time to regenerate our power. And next in our reading, we have the letter Chet. And it's got its legs in the air. The letter Chet is the number 8, which is the infinity loop. It is the letter that begins the word Chai, number 18, right? Chai, which is life. But also Choshek, which is darkness, and we cannot see lights without darkness. We can't see the moon as well in the daylight. Sometimes we see her, but better at night, better in the darkness. Choshek is the first word in Torah that uses het. So it's a really important word, darkness. It's followed immediately by light. But that's the transformation, right? Light and darkness, that's the moon's cycles. So 8, the number that is infinity, because there are 7 days of creation and then one more. After creation, what happens next? The rest of time, infinity. It speaks to 8 lights in the darkness, as in Hanukkah. It speaks to the constellation of Cancer and the month of Tammuz, which is coming up next. It's our next month. It's the gullet in the body, so like the throat, sort of the esophagus area, the taking in of nourishment and sustenance, both spiritual and physical. And in my reading of it, it corresponds to the devil card in tarot, about attachments, commitments, limitations, restrictions, and pleasure as well. We found it upside down like this. I have a battery light. Let me grab a power cord. One moment, please. Okay, so we found the chet upside down with his legs in the air. So maybe we're having some struggles with our inner life, our feelings of life force. And potentially that darkness is turning around, that we've had some darkness and now it's changing, it's transforming. Even though we're in the waning of the moon, something about that darkness is transforming, maybe transforming us internally, so that we can find our bright light, find our life force shining forth. Right here. Finding the infinite within. And our final letter in the reading is the letter Ayin. And the letter Ayin over here, it represents an eye in the body. Vision, being able to see our way forward and see what is the next right thing to do. Also about being watched over by the divine, knowing that we are divinely watched over, and, the moon, who's always watching. Whether we can see her or not, she is there. It is the number 70 in Gematria, so it corresponds to this ultimate manifestation of completion, 7 being the number of days of creation, like Zion, and 70 being that ultimate manifestation of the completion of creation. So something is coming to an end. This is, again, face down in our reading, so something, we're humbled by its ending. Maybe there's been some darkness, maybe there's been some even death, or death of some part of oneself. Maybe our inner power has been stressed, or our life force has been challenged, and we're coming to the end of that phase of life. Wouldn't that be nice? Ayin is the foundation of laughter in the Sefer Yetzirah, the translation that I read. And I like that in terms of something is coming to an end, maybe something incredibly difficult is coming to an end, and maybe we can find the humor in it at the end. That's my hope, that when things are completed, we can find joy again, but not just joy, but laughter, finding the humor in the situation. Maybe we've learned something through our trials and tribulations that otherwise would not have been clear. We'll be able to see more clearly with that laughter, with that amusing anecdote that comes out of all of this. Ayin is related to the tribe of Dan. Dan, which means judgment. And that fits so well with the completion, an ultimate completion, that there is some judgment usually at the end of a thing. And I correspond it with the judgment card in tarot, which is that review or rite of passage, the transition that we're coming to at the end of a thing. Tribe of Dan. But being able to see clearly, being able to judge maybe more clearly what's true and what is not true, and being humbled by it. Again, since it is face down. So for those of you who chose the Botticelli Moon card, feeling exposed outside our fortress and having to wrestle with the horrible lobster from the deep as we struggle with our subconscious in this moon phase, as we're coming from the fullness of the moon into the waning of the moon, finding our humility, maybe rolling onto our back or rolling onto our face in front of the mystery, in front of the unknown, walking through that doorway, humbly ducking our head so we can make it underneath the low door that we walk through. And though our power may be in shadow right now, maybe this time of Sivan, where we're humbled again, maybe our power has been low right now. We can transform that darkness. That darkness is turned on its head, and we can know that the light is coming back, that our life is coming back, our life force is coming back. We have this ultimate completion, and we are humbled with the miracle of it all. The way we humble ourselves before the light of the moon, as she changes and yet remains the same. So for those of you who chose card number 2, this has been your reading. I hope you enjoyed it and found it useful, and I'll see you here next time. Hello, card number 3. You've chosen the Aquarian Tarot Moon. I'm going to light a new candle. Our candle went out in the middle of last reading. So here's a new light. And this is our moon card from the Aquarian Tarot, and it is a beautiful blue, dark blue sky with the crescent moon, although we are in the fullness of the Moon of Sivan right now. It's the number 18, which in Hebrew, those of you who speak Hebrew know, is Chai, which means life. I'm not seeing a whole lot of other symbols on this card. Some little Art Deco flourishes at the bottom, which sort of remind me of mountains. The moon represents mystery and the unknown and transformation, transitions. The moon is seen as being about visions and dreams and imaginations and searching inside. It can be seen to be about illusions, eccentricity, and hallucinations. Frequently on the traditional tarot cards, you see a monster coming up from the deep. So the shadow self and the unknown, the things that we are hiding underneath the surface, is illuminated by the moon. So we're going to pull out some Hebrunes today to talk about what is it we're trying to illuminate right now in our own lives. I'm going to pull them out of this incantation bowl, which I noticed has a moon inside of it as well, the moon and the sun, and an eye for vision. So we're going to shuffle these up and pull out a handful and see what comes out today for your reading. Oh, my goodness. Okay, so I'm going to take out all the ones that are face down, unless we have the blank, which we do, and read what's left, which at this point is just 3, and that is completely fine. I'm going to leave them in the direction that they landed, which is mostly upright, and I'll pick up each of them and talk about what they're trying to say here. The one at the top here is the letter Mem, and the Mem is the mother letter of water. You can see that it looks like a womb. It's a container with a hole at the bottom, like a uterus. And that seems incredibly appropriate, considering the moon affects the water on the earth. It brings the tides, and we are mostly water, and it impacts us in our ocean that we are gestated within, the amniotic fluid of the womb, the mother letter of water, the mother letter of maternity. It's the number 40 in Gematria, which speaks to the 40 weeks of gestation in the human body. Ideally, not always, but ideally, textbook case, we are gestated for 40 weeks within this water, within that ocean inside of the womb bearer that carries us. So it's about creation and, the creation of life. And cleansing as well. The waters are cleansing, and the word mikvah, which is a ritual bath, begins with the letter mem as well. Our matriarch and prophetess, Miriam Hanevia, is the sister of Moses. She's one of our earliest priestesses in Hebrew, who has a mystical, magical well, who follows her. It follows her throughout the desert. She's able to find water as we wander. She's the one who helped guide Moshe in the basket in the river Nile, and the one who danced when we reached the other side of the Red Sea as we flee from Egypt, from the narrow place. She dances in celebration. Miriam, the prophetess, the one who speaks truth. The letter mem corresponds to the belly in the body. So where we have all of our vital organs, our stomach, our intestines, our uteruses, if we have them, our gallbladder, our spleens, our livers are a little bit higher up, but they're still touching that belly. So all the things belly in our body are represented by the letter mem. And because it corresponds with water, it's about gestation, but also emotion and how we feel love and grief and the tears that we spill when we are grieving. All the wet stuff. The number 40 is significant in that we are said to have spent 40 years in the wilderness wandering, 40 weeks in the womb gestating, 40 days on the mountain waiting for revelation, 40 days of rain in the story of Noah. All these 40s and water are wrapped up in the mem. I see the mem as corresponding to the high priestess card in tarot. The high priestess, who is the mother of the moon. She is the moon goddess, the moon priestess. And the Shekhinah, the indwelling presence. It's all about receptivity, which is so strong, so strongly related to the moon, being receptive, being open to our dreams, being open to wrestling with our divinity, wrestling with our shadow self, wrestling with that lobster from the deep and the wolf and the dog that are howling at the moon. We have to be open to all of that in order to find our connection and to find our transformation. The moon is famous for cycles and transformation, going from fullness to emptiness and back to fullness again. And those cycles are important. In our bellies, where we eat and then our bellies become empty again and we eat again, where we create and then we rest and then we create again, where we cleanse ourselves and then we become dirty and we cleanse ourselves again. All of these cycles are inherent in the letter Mem and in the moon itself. Moon, Mem. It's English as opposed to Hebrew, but I can't let that be lost either. The next letter in our reading is the letter He. And the letter He is the first letter of the word Hineni, which means here I am, present and ready for service to the divine. When the divine calls a name in Torah, the appropriate answer is Hineni, here I am. It's the word that Adam and Eve could not say in the garden because they felt ashamed. But after that, for the rest of our lives, we spend the rest of Torah answering the call, where are you? Hineni, here I am. And so it's about presence. It's about being here, being ready for service to divinity, to our connection with the divine, to our inner divine. The presence, the Shekhinah, the indwelling presence of the divine, which, as I said, is representative by the moon, by the high priestess, by presence, that changing, that ever-changing and yet ever-present moon. Because even when we can't see the moon, she is there. He is the number 5 in Gematria, which speaks to action in the world with our 5 fingers, right? We have 5 fingers on each hand, and we use those to create in the world, to do good, to do service. The 5 books of Moses in the Torah, which is our history, mythology, guidebook, if you follow the Jewish faith. There are 5 levels of soul, it is said, represented by the 5 of the He. He is 2 letters of the divine name, the Yud He Vav He. And so I like to say that presence shows up twice in divinity, and that half of divinity is showing up for ourselves, showing up for the divine showing up for us as well. It's a partnership. And He corresponds to the liver in the body. The liver, which in Hebrew is keved, the same root as the word kavod. Kavod meaning honor and glory. And it has this concept of gravitas, liver being the heaviest organ in the body, and kavod being this weighty concept of honor. He corresponds to the tribe of Judah. Judah, the name, the tribe after which the Jews are named. And the name Judah is spelled Yud He Vav Dalet He. It has the divine name right there with the Dalet inside of it. So I like to think of Judah as being the divine name with a Dalet, meaning doorway, inside of it. So a way through the doorway to the divine, and a way for the divine to find its way through a doorway into our existence. For me, at any rate, Judaism has been that. He is the sense of sight. In the Sefer Yetzirah, the letters all have a foundation or a sense that is affiliated with them. And He has the sense of sight affiliated with it. So the word light appears 5 times in the creation story. And so He, being the number 5, has to do with illumination, being able to see. And it is about presence, as I said, Hineni. Seeing things from maybe a different perspective, seeing things illuminated, I see hay as corresponding to the hanged man in tarot because it has to do with patience and surrender and a different perspective. And so when we get called by the divine, when we hear the divine call us to do something, it's important for us to show up, be present, remain patient, continue to listen, and surrender. And the light of the moon, or halevana, the lightness, the whiteness of the moon, helps us to see. It's one of the lights of the sky. So when all seems dark, we have the moon above to remind us that light exists, that even though things seem shadowy, we can find our way, that we can tap into our kavod, our honor and the glory of the divine in the reflection and the light of the moon. The liver is the organ in the body that filters the blood. So it helps us to clear out toxins from our body. So there's a certain level of discernment that comes with the hay as well, being able to filter out what is toxic in our body, in our life, maybe finding the darkness, the things that are not serving, and letting them go. And the moon helps to illuminate that for us, even when it is dark. And the final Hebrune in our reading for you today is the Ein Sof. It's the blank. It looks like the full moon. I always put a blank Hebrune in each of the sets because it's the primordial material. It's the template onto which all the other letters are drawn. It's the deep, the Tahom, the water. The deep is represented by water, but it's like the infinite. It's the stuff out of which everything else is made. The Ein Sof, that without end, the infinite. Before there was anything, the time before time, the stuff before stuff, the material, the building blocks, or the substrate into which everything else was carved. All these letters were carved into pure divinity to create channels through which the divine can pour into our worlds, into our life. And that's why the letters are so important. They are those channels, and they allow us to communicate and to speak and to write, to communicate with each other and ourselves throughout the infinite, throughout time. And they're all carved into this blankness, this unknown, this infinite, the infinite divine. And I love that it looks like the moon in the sky, the full moon right now up in the sky. The Ein Sof is that primordial chaos, the tohu vavohu, the boundlessness, the timelessness of all. So it represents the divine itself, but also that blank peacefulness that will come after that which exists outside of time and space. The fact that we all were and are and will be the one again. This idea of beingness. The existence without past, present, or future, without substance and with all substance. The void in the best possible sense, meaning going back to the zero-ness of all, or going forward into the zero-ness of all, the combination and the culmination of all. And I love this for you. I love this for you who chosen this Aquarian deck moon today. That we have the water, that is pulled on by the moon, that we are mostly water, that our gestation happens within an oceanic space. We start out infinitesimally small and we grow into that space and then are birthed into the world. And we're constantly being transformed through water. That right now is our time to find presence. To say, here I am, showing up. And that brings us into a time of the infinite. A time of fullness and emptiness, both at the same time somehow. So for those of you who chose the Aquarian Tarot Moon today, this has been your reading. I hope you found it entertaining and helpful and educational. And I hope to see you here again next time. Hello, card number 4. Those of you who chose the Wildwood Tarot, the Moon on the Water. Let's take a look. We have the number 18, which in Hebrew is the word chai, meaning life. And let's take a look. We have the reflection of the moon in water, you can see. And up here on the top, we can see 2 animals, maybe more. We've got a bull or an oryx. It looks like a wild ox. Maybe a crane flying across the moon, and can't tell if those are crows or bats. Let me take a closer look here. Hard to tell. Some kind of winged creatures. Maybe they're more cranes. At any rate, several flying birds, many twisted trees, and this wild ox all standing before the moon as it's reflected in the water below. So the moon traditionally is considered a mystery, the unknown, the deep, dreams, illumination, but also the shadow side, femininity, receptivity, which I find interesting in this card with the oryx, who's incredibly powerful, wild animal. And the birds, cranes and bats and crows, and with all in silhouette, all in shadow. And yet the full moon illuminates so much, especially reflecting on water here, water being also symbolic of the deep and the unknown. In the traditional tarot card, you see a creature crawling up from the water and a wolf and a dog howling at the moon. I think it's interesting that there are these animals here instead today. So that's our moon card, and I'm going to pull out some Hebrunes today to help illuminate what is it that your subconscious is trying to communicate today through this reading. I'm going to shuffle these Hebrunes up in my incantation bowl, which in fact has a moon and an eye and a sun in the bottom of it. So we're going to shuffle these up and pull out a handful and toss them in and see what comes out today for what is your subconscious wanting to communicate to you today through this reading. What is your subconscious communicating? Okay, we have a few. Let's take a look. take out the ones that are face down, and let's read the two that are here, the way they ended up, and then maybe we'll pull out a couple more, since this is such a small reading, although we may get plenty out of these two. Let's take a look. The letter Samech is the one at the top here, and well, I love that it landed like this, so it was a little bit topsy-turvy, but I love that it looks like the full moon. It looks like the full moon right here on the card in the water. The letter Samech is all about cycles and circles. So it very much corresponds to the moon, in that the moon has its cycles where it is in its fullness, and then it wanes and it becomes empty, and then it waxes and it becomes full again, and it's got this cyclical nature to it. It is the timepiece of the Hebrew calendar and other lunar calendars, but for our purposes, it is the timekeeper of our cycles of the year, our seasons of harvest and planting, and our times of wet and dry we measure by watching the moon go through its cycles. The letter Samech is about being surrounded. The word sovev, which means to surround or surrounding, begins with the letter Samech. And so in that vein, Samech speaks to being surrounded by boundaries, about circle casting, about putting up protection around oneself. And the moon can be seen as a protective entity. Many of us call to the moon for protection, especially at night, especially when things are dark, especially when we're struggling with things in our subconscious or our unconscious selves. Samech is all about boundaries and protection. It, in the Paleo Hebrew and the ancient Hebrew, looked like a thorn. And you can see a little bit of a vestigial thorn on the upper left corner there. And thorns are all about protection. They're not just there to injure us, they're there to protect. They're there to protect the plants. A rose, which is a beautiful thing, has thorns to keep people from just ripping them up. So Samech has its thorns, and they're there to protect us. It is said that in the ancient days that people would plant thorny hedges around their property or fields to protect their homes or their livestock from predators, and also to keep them safely inside. And boundaries are like that. We need to set up protective boundaries sometimes in order to keep ourselves safe and to keep out folks who would invade those spaces and take what is ours, our property, but also just our energy, our time, the things that are most valuable in life. Samech is the foundation of agitation. In the Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation, each of the letters has a foundation or a correspondence to a sense. And the foundation of agitation corresponds to Samech in the translation that I read of the Sefer Yetzirah, that foundation of becoming agitated in order perhaps to establish boundaries. Having a little bit of thorniness in order to know where the edges are. The Samech is like a wheel, and so therefore it speaks to cycles and transformations, and also comfort and being surrounded with family, being surrounded with maybe a warm hug, a blanket, with comfort, with friends, about support, asking for support when one needs it. It is the number 60 in Gematria. And to that end, it speaks to being... 6 is the number which is the last day of creation, of active creation. And 10 times 6 is this manifestation of a nearing completion. So we're in a cycle, but we're nearing the completion of it. Like I said, we just went through the full moon of Sivan. We finished our revelation, and we've passed through the midpoint of the month. And so we're moving toward the end of Sivan, but also we're coming to the end of spring. So our summer solstice is coming up in our solar calendar. So we're almost done with spring. It corresponds to the Wheel of Fortune, which is all about wheels and cycles and change and luck as well. Transformation. The way the moon transforms, the way those cycles change. So even when things are difficult, or we're struggling with one of these beasts that has come up in the darkness, it's important to remember that everything changes. That this is a moment in a life. This is a moment of perhaps suffering. Maybe it's a moment of joy, but everything changes. So not to get too attached. Cycles come and cycles go. And so Samhain is here. And the moon is here to remind us. And if I remember right, the Samhain was upside down when it came out. So to me, that speaks to the inner cycles, the inner transformations that we're looking for. So we're looking at what is agitating us. What is it that is calling us to set up good boundaries? What is transforming within us? What shadow beast is coming out that we need to address? Maybe it's time to set up boundaries so that beast stays out, and maybe it's time to set up boundaries so that beast stays in, or tame the beast. Allow it to find transformation within us, in the moon, in the light of the moon, in the illumination that we have in this darkness right now. And the other letter that came up in our reading is the letter Pe. And it landed upside down as well. And it is down here. I'm going to pull it up so you can see it. The letter Pe upright looks like this. It is said to be the mouth of the divine, speaking the world into existence. It is said that the divine creates through speech. And then we also have been given that power, the power of speech, in order to create what we'd like to see in the world. And we need to use that gift wisely. The Pe is also about time and spirals and cycles. You can see it looks like a spiral. I love that we have both the Samhain as a circle and the Pe as a spiral here. Things change. The seasons change. The moon changes. We change. And this is the entire message of your reading, is that everything is changing. Not to get too attached to how things are, because tomorrow they will be different. The letter Pe is the number 80 in Gematria, which is the number that represents an ultimate manifestation of the infinite. The number 8 is that infinity loop, being one more than the days of creation times 10. So this ultimate manifestation of the infinite being both the divine and time, the unknown. The word time in Hebrew is pa'am, which begins with the letter pei. So the mouth, communication, creation, the infinite, time. And face, panei being in the face of the moon, the face of the one, the face of the divine. Facing things with our punam. Sometimes I see pei as a labyrinth that we can walk. Not to get lost, but to find ourselves, to find enlightenment. And pei is the binary transformation of grace and ugliness. And when I think about that in terms of communication and the mouth, I think of it in terms of blessing and curse. Like, where are we wanting to curse what we don't love in our lives? And how can we transform that into blessing? How can we speak forth that which we would like to see, rather than cursing what we don't want to see, rather than saying, oh, I hate being sick, maybe saying, I would love to be healthy. And how can I find health within my illness? How can I transform what I'm seeing as a curse into a blessing by having gratitude for what I do have? The letter P rules over the planet Venus in the sky. So there's love. Finding love is one path through that labyrinth to find blessing. And using our words to create the reality we'd like to see in the world. I see Pei as corresponding to the Hierophant in the tarot, who is the mouthpiece of divinity, sometimes seen as a rigid belief system, but I think the Hierophant is sometimes misunderstood, or perhaps the Hierophant has sometimes misunderstood divinity. But regardless, there's this ability for us to find wisdom, even in the most strict and rigid of teachers, if we can see that that is another aspect of our own self. And how can we transform that into finding the gems of wisdom even within the most rigid of systems? It doesn't mean we need to stay there. It doesn't mean we need to endure abuse, but there's wisdom in all things. Because all things are made up of divinity, and the divine is infinite and mysterious, like the moon. The moon is one aspect of the divine. And the Pei appeared upside down here in the lower corner of our reading, sort of half in the shadow. And I find that interesting because the Pei, it's about inner communication. It's about creating our inner self to be a blessing, looking within to find our transformation from ugliness to grace. And I just noticed a minute ago that when you look at both of these letters upside down, it looks like the word go in English. So there's our message. Go forth. Become the moon. Become the aurochs. Become the flight of the bird. Become the water. Become the twisted tree. Become the mouthpiece of the divine. Become the boundary and the thorn and the protection and the surrounding hug. Go. So for those of you who chose Moon on Water, this has been your reading for the full moon of Sivan. I hope you found it interesting and amusing. Maybe a little enlightening. Enjoy the moon, and I hope to see you here next time.